The death of Captain Marvel for me was traumatizing when I was a kid, when I read that graphic novel, because here's Captain Marvel and he doesn't make it out. And it wasn't a supervillain that takes him out. And he didn't go out fighting. He wasn't punching his way with mega fists or whatever out of that battle.
Hey, thanks for listening. Usually I like to start these off with a positive note or some sort of high or low about my writing progress and process, but today my mind is completely on an old friend, Brett Lewis. Brett is an amazing writer and a great artist in his own right, and you probably know him from the Wintermen that he did with another friend of ours, John Paul Leon. Brett, I guess in 2009, was in an accident. He was hit by a vehicle as a pedestrian and suffered significant head trauma and has struggled with the after effects, but he was hospitalized the other day. Fortunately, he is recovering, but the progress is going to be long and tough. And I'll put a link in the description to a GoFundMe set up by another friend to help Brett. Please check it out. There's lots of outpour and support for Brett happening right now online, which is wonderful. And many people have stepped up, and this is great. But the more people who can help, the more opportunity Brett will have to get back on his feet. And that's what we want. We want Brett to be back doing his thing. And I don't think I'll be completely rested until that happens. So, yeah, and if you could do me a favor as well, beyond going to that GoFundMe, if you could recommend this podcast to other people, not only does that help the podcast, but it'll help get the word out. And the more people that can hear about this can help. Really, thank you. Please spread the word. This week's guest is Cullen Bunn. I have a few criteria about who I go after to get on this podcast, and do I really love what they do, or do I want to understand, why it is they do what they do? Cullen falls firmly in that second category for me. Not that they have to be mutually exclusive, but he is all in the horror genre. And I am not a horror guy, never have been. It's just not my thing. So I'm fascinated with people who really are into things that I don't, cotton to. So we kind of get into all that. We talk about his past works like The Damned and The Sixth Gun and a bunch of other things. And his current project, Copycat, that's up on Zoop right now. You can order it. There'll be a link in the description too. And then future projects like Beyond Mortal. We really got into the odd turns and quirks that kind of change our pathways in life, and the process of writing and the hard work it is to build a career in whatever form of the arts you choose. This guy's been doing it for a while, and he was really interesting to talk to. So this is me with Cullen Bunn.
I've been playing the game for a long time now.
When did you get your dice to play the game?
So to some degree, I've been doing that stuff for, I guess closing in on 15 years ago, 16 years ago. I mean, okay. I've always been doing a little bit of that. In the last few years, I've been doing a lot more of it. I mean, I'm doing, there are weeks where all I'm doing is pitch meetings, and it's so yeah. The last few years is when I really started I jumped in with both feet into that, or was thrown in head first into it.
Who threw you?
Oh, publishers will sometimes have me come in and say, okay, we want you to pitch this, pitch this as a TV show, or pitch this movie for us, or one of my media representatives will say, hey, Cullen, they want you in the room to pitch. And I was like, okay, let's do that, because my favorite thing in the world is to live pitch anything. And that's me being very sarcastic. I hate it. I hate live pitching. Yeah. But I've been doing a lot of it. And then in the last few years, I started sort of an upstart production company with my friend Heath Modio. And since then, we've been doing a lot. I mean, we've done a lot of pitches.
Yeah.
Usually, a lot of times the nice ones, I'm sitting in while someone else pitches, and then I answer the questions. And then, but at least a good 25 to 30% of the time, I'm doing the pitching myself these days.
Yeah. I guess there's two sort of directions here. One, how do you see the difference when pitching, a comic project versus pitching something to non-comic people? Like, how are you envisioning it and framing it? Do you have a differentiation in your mind, or is it all the same for you?
It would be nice if it was all the same. It's not. It's first of all, I breathe rarefied air, in that when I want to pitch a comic, I just email someone and say, hey, here's a comic pitch. What do you think?
Sure.
And that is a nice place to be. And those pitches can sometimes be a sentence, 2 sentences. It doesn't have to be a full pitch document. So first of all, pitching comics is easy for me. At least I've been doing this long enough. I've built relationships with the editors. So pitching the comics easy, much easier than pitching something like a TV show or a movie. But you have to kind of look at it a little differently. I mean, I think a big mistake a lot of people make both ways is thinking that a comic book story is interchangeable with a television show or a movie, because they are completely different beasts. And they're completely different. They work differently. You can get away with you get away with things in a comic you can't get away with in a TV show. You can dig much deeper into story elements in a TV show than you can in comics. You can follow different paths. So I just don't even think of them the same anymore. And it's almost like pitching a completely new project. I mean, it's some of the stuff I've been pitching recently is I've worked on the comics for years, but it's like something completely new when you get into pitching it as a TV show, because it's going to work different. It's going to evolve differently. It's going to be presented differently. And that's fine. They're not supposed to be, as far as I'm concerned, they're not supposed to be the same thing.
Right.
Some people have pulled that off, I guess, with these perfect, frame by frame adaptations, but that's not the way. I think it's not made. They're not made to work that way.
No. And I would argue to say that the frame by frame adaptations, I mean, the person who created the actual original material wasn't envisioning this as anything more than what they were making, which was, a book. And this book, because it's funny, like you have to take these considerations into account. Like, budget is this thing that, while comics aren't free, the budget really doesn't vary. And you can put whatever you want on the page, provided you have the people who have the talent to do so.
Right.
But it doesn't really cost anymore. You can have the greatest artist in the world draw 2 people sitting at a cafe having coffee, or draw the most insane thing that ever existed in mankind.
Yeah.
And when you are, when you're faced with this concept of like, oh, okay, like you have to think like, what do I do? Like, so, in telling you the story about doing a big event kind of thing for an international brand, it's really not that much different. You have to be cognizant of what can be achieved within the time, the money, and the resources you have available. And it can be frustrating because there are so many more cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, but you have to, when you're talking about media adaptations, I mean, there's a lot of money on the line. It's not, there's a reason it's not easy to make these things happen. They cost a fortune.
Yeah. I mean, the people all involved, the amount of money that gets spent. I mean, listen, if you are fortunate to have someone say, hey, we want to option a story from you, and you benefit well from that, that's skin in the game already, right off the bat. The people aren't, yes, some companies will option to take something off the table if it competes. Like, sure. There are very large, players who will do this kind of thing, but predominantly it is people who are really looking to make something that can make them money or the attention that they want to garner in the said industry. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting, I think it's a fascinating world. The world of pitching in general, whether it's to comics, whatever, is fascinating. I think I think some people are really good at it across the board.
Right.
And I don't know that I'm good at it across the board. I don't love it.
Well, you got attention. I mean, it was, was The Damned sort of the first attention that you got when it came outside of the industry, when it, with that?
Yeah, The Damned was the first thing that got optioned way back when. So
right.
I was still working, my day job when The Damned got optioned back then. And it was, it was an exciting, intoxicating time. And it's been optioned a few times. That dance keeps happening with The Damned over and over again.
Sure.
So,
there's this old comedy bit in advertising that, so advertising kind of works where you have an art director and a copywriter who work together as a team, and they do the thing, and they make the ads for the companies. But it's not typically just one team. Like, they say, hey, we need to win, the account. So they'll put many teams on the effort to try to come up with ideas to do this. And someone said, if you want to have a really great long career in advertising, don't be the number one team, be the number two team, because you're the one that this is so great, but this other one that's the one we want to go with. That team then has to deal with the client, in a horrible fashion for an ongoing period of time. You get to go back to your office and and wait for the next pitch deck. So I guess in some way The Damned is sort of your number two. It just keeps coming back and offering some really great great opportunities for people.
Yeah, I get why people, the interesting thing is, like The Damned, I'm like, it's a no for me. For me and my collaborators, we think about The Damned and we say it's a no-brainer. How come someone hasn't made this yet? So the answer is it's expensive. It's a very expensive show to make or movie to make, and it's got to be the right time. It's very much like throwing a dart at a dartboard, and you have to get one little section, but the dartboard's spinning, so you have to throw it at exactly the right moment, and it has to be the right dart, and it has to be thrown in the right way. So it's very it doesn't surprise me that it hasn't been made, but at the same time, it's one of those such a no-brainer. So it's such a no-brainer for somebody.
It's it reminds me like all those sort of NASA things where they have to calculate the specific speed of the ship to get around the Earth to slingshot it to the. And if you don't make it, you're gone off in space forever. Like, it's like, yeah. Yeah. But like, so, I mean, getting that, cause like, I mean, a lot of people would, you know, man, I mean, I can't tell you. And this, I mean, dude, I got in the comic business in 1991. And I went to art school in New York City with people all wanting to be comic book artists and writers and whatever they wanted to be. They wanted to all be hotshots and with some fashion. And I couldn't tell you how many people you would run across these people going like, yeah, I mean, I like doing comics, but I really want to be a director in film. I'm like, well, why aren't you going after that? Like, why do you think that someone's going to look at your comic book and say, you should be a film director?
Yeah. Go do that. See, you know, there was a moment in comics, and maybe still is, where that's how you got into comics, was go and make a TV show or a movie, and then you could get hired to do comics.
Right.
So that's fine. That seems a little, okay. Well, you know what? At the end of the day, though, who am I to say? Get in however you can break in. That's
sure. Fine. I just feel that always put the energy toward the thing that you want to do versus all the other stuff to get.
I've always said that, but you know, look, I guess it just depends on what you want to do. But I agree with you. If you want to make comics, make comics. There's not a, but you know, if you're putting, you know, you're doing something with another objective in mind, you're writing a comic, but really your eyes on a completely different target. It comes across. I think it comes across. I think you can see. I think you can tell.
Well, wasn't the case going, you know, in the context of the comic book movie for the longest period of time, when people just didn't really love comic books or making them, you ended up with these, you know, movies, but they didn't feel like a comic book movie. And then you get the people who love comic books and you start getting the sense of like, oh, this is what it should feel like. And I'm not even talking specifically, you know, the sort of the Marvel Revolution, you know, starting with Iron Man. There are a handful of independents before that where really had that comic book feel. And you're like, yeah, you guys got this idea.
Yeah, well, they felt like the source. Yeah, they definitely felt like the source material too. I mean, there were some of those indies were real, were really well done, and felt like you were flipping the page on those books. So,
yeah, totally. So, what was the day job before you said that's it?
So, I was working in marketing when I was a VP of marketing for a company. When I went full time, and before I'd been with that company for 15, 16 years doing various jobs. Unlike pitching, where I don't feel I'm good at pitching, I was really good at conning my way into positions that I had no right to be in. And, you know, I was a fake it till you make it and don't bother making it kind of guy. I mean, it was, you know, I ran IT departments for the IT department for the company. You know how little I know about IT? Even then I was like an old grandpa. I was like, how do you make this work? I don't get it. But, yeah, so I ran IT, and I was a career consultant for a time, and then I went into marketing for that company, and I did marketing for several years there, and until the moment I decided, hey, I got to take a chance on something. I'd waited in my opinion, I waited too long to take the chance of actually trying to do comics. I struck when I needed to. The iron was hot, but it took me too long to heat that iron up. And I don't know if that's any fault. Some of it's fault of my own, probably. But also, it was just the timing of it. It's just how things worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, the shoulda, woulda, coulda thing is a natural kind of response in so many ways. I mean, fortunately, you have been so busy to be distracted from that circle, which I'm sure it comes back and loops over here and there. You know, you go, wait a minute.
Ever present. It's ever present.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's so strange because, you know, like I said, that's part and parcel with the imposter syndrome. You know, like it's just one of these things where you have all this whole sort of deck of cards of things that can just be played for yourself. You're playing solitaire with this deck of cards all the time.
Right.
You know. Wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know that I think you've said you had a creative writing degree. Like, what was your mindset of like, hey, I'm on university. I'm going to get a degree. It's going to be creative writing, and I'm going to.
So I always wanted to be a writer. I knew I wanted to write. I knew I
Okay.
wanted to do that for a living. And I remember talking to my counselor, like the first couple of weeks at college. I was talking to my guided, not guided, I don't know what they are, the counselor. And, and I told him, he asked me, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I really want to be a writer. And he's like, I don't know about that. I don't know that that's a good idea. And I'm like, well, that's what I want to do. And then we talked about it. He said, well, the creative writing degree, you could go in a lot of directions. And I really pondered all of these things. I mean, there was a moment I was on a teaching path. There was a moment where I was advertising and marketing path. There's a moment where I was like, well, I'm just going to get my MFA and I'll teach college level and things like that. It was always, these things I was pursuing in different directions. So I went into creative writing or journalism. That was an option.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into creative writing with this idea that I could use it for different paths if I wanted to. And then I just couldn't afford college anymore. After I got my degree, I couldn't afford an advanced degree. So I was like, well, I'm just going to get a job somewhere. So I got a job at a comic book store for a while. And then I got a job at this company where I talked them into letting me offer career advice to other people for a while. So
you're a part-time psychologist, right?
Yeah. But yeah, I just, and the interesting thing about the degree, I feel like I was a decent writer when I entered that, when I started doing creative writing. And it was nice to have these teachers and these people who were focused on that, who were giving me great feedback. And it was nice to do the round tables where people are giving you feedback on your work. But for me, it was more important that I was learning how to turn stories in on time.
Mm-hmm.
I have to turn this story in by this date or I get dinged on my grade. So I was writing the deadline so it was nice to learn that. And then, having that job for 16 years, we're working with that company for 16 years later, after, that taught me how to work. I mean, I think there's a lot of folks who get into a creative field and they're lucky enough to get into that creative field very early.
Yeah.
And then they don't know how to work. And that's an element of it that
I'm going to throw myself right in that one right there. I mean, I got hired right out of the box. I graduated within a month. I got my first gig at Marvel. And, and I'm like, oh, this is it. This is easy. And, but the thing is that story wasn't even written. They're like, yeah, right. It's for a comic book that's going to happen at the end of the year. So there was no script and I had no idea what to do at that point. I had been hustling, for 2 years while I was in school to get work. And then the opportunity happened, but like everyone was just going to wait until I did that job because they're like, well, like let him take the risk on you. So I was just spinning, and it took a lot of doubling down and figuring out how to kind of get out of that space. But I did struggle. I struggled for a long time. That whole like how to like show up, do the thing, and then call it a day.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do, and you have to learn it. As far as comics goes, I don't feel like I ever had to learn that in comics. I'd already learned it doing something else.
Yeah.
But I do think, had I gone into comics, say right out of college somehow, I don't know how that would have even happened. But had I done that, it would have been a rude awakening, I think, for me, and it would have been a shocking experience.
Yeah, and I mean, also to that point, dude, it's like you said earlier about the writing thing when you're in school, you're like, it could be journalism, it could be advertising, it could be all these different avenues. And for me, I had spent 4 years becoming a comic book artist in my mind.
Right.
And so I didn't have this sort of like, well, I'll also go get editorial spots or whatever the thing was.
Yeah.
I had no angle on that stuff. I had no concept of it. I mean, when people would go like, hey, so-and-so needs a thing drawn, you go, oh, okay, I can do that. And then you would do it. And then it was just a matter of like discovering over time you could do more than one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the comic shop employment, the brief and comic shop employment indicates that comic books were always sort of part of the plan in your heart.
I always loved comics since I was a kid. I mean, and there was a while where I was a relatively talented artist in middle school and early high school, and I stopped pursuing it. And I feel like, so I don't know. I do know. I used to carry around this giant folder full of drawings. I mean, I was the kid who was always drawing. And I carried around this giant folder full of drawings, monsters and creatures and heroes and comic pages and all these different things. Years of work. And it was my pride and joy. This thing was rubber band together, it was that thick. And at gym class one day, somebody stole it, and I was done. I was out. I was like, nope, I'm done with that. I'm not gonna rebuild that. And I think I really do think that's why I stopped doing anything and I stopped progressing. I can still draw almost as well as I can draw. I could draw in 10th grade, 9th or 10th grade. But I'm no better. But I always wanted to tell stories. That never went away. And I didn't care how I did it. I didn't care if it was short stories, novels, screenplays, plays, poetry, comic books. It was all stuff I wanted. I was into, role-playing games, any of it. I didn't care as long as it was me being able to tell a story in some way. So the comic shop was just, I was working at a bookstore, and then I found out the comic shop was hiring, and I went and, applied there first as like a product manager who would order material in for the stores and keep the store stocked. And then they hired me as a manager of one of the shops. I was always into comics with the prerequisite moments where you get out of it and you're not into it. Yeah. Still wish I had those drawings. I'd love to find that folder again.
I had this vision since you mentioned that, as like the kid who stole it, like, was just playing a practical joke and just kind of hid it in a place somewhere in the locker room, like not like there. Destroyed it, and it's still there, just covered in cobwebs and dust after 30 years.
That would be an interesting. It would be interesting.
Yeah. Maybe Nicolas Cage can star as you in this story and go back and find it.
Yes, I'm into it. I'm going to pitch that next. It's the next pitch.
I think that's an appropriate.
It's National Treasure, but in a podunk junior high or high school, looking for a
National Lampoon Treasure.
Yeah, there we go.
I don't want to leave the pitching thing too far behind in a sec, but I'm just curious, like, what the like on your end, like what assets are provided to you in the terms of like, hey, we want to pitch. Is there a budget? Do you have to like produce things for the pitch, or is this all verbal?
So we're talking non-comics, like
yeah.
Sometimes you can produce things. Oftentimes if we're pitching an adaptation, the comic becomes sort of a tool in that,
like an animatic kind of thing.
Yeah. But we usually put together pitch decks. So, like a PowerPoint presentation that'll have different images. Sometimes it's with a comic, it's nice because you can pull the comic in, you can pull images from the book and, you know, show what they look like. Maybe you pull images that are real world images that you compare to the comic to show what it would look like on a live action TV show or something. You might pull in images of actors that you could envision playing these different characters and things like that. So, I mean, these pitch decks can be really, really elaborate. I mean, they can be really, they're fun to look at. You know, I love getting uh, pitch decks from like TV shows that I like now and seeing
Mm-hmm.
what those, you know, how they pitched it, how it's different, what they, you know, what they presented it as, and things like that. And, you know, there's no set format. They're all different. Everyone I've looked at is very different from
Yeah.
everyone is different from the last.
Yeah, I too like working with companies and getting my hands on their pitch decks as well, because I like to see how people are framing sort of the you know the question and the and the solution. And often I find that it's so much more beneficial to be really, really concise in these things. Often you see these decks and it's just so much stuff and you go, what am I focusing on?
Well, yeah. I've seen some that, you know, that just have pages of text on the screen. I'm like, don't do that. Why would we do that? No one's reading that. No one can be. A simple picture is so much better because someone's talking. Someone's, you know, these pitch decks are going on screen. You know, if it's a Zoom or whatever, or
Right.
someone is talking while you're looking at this thing.
Right. Don't type the script on the
Right.
on the pages.
Right.
Don't do that.
No one likes that.
No. So I thought about you like in the sense that, you know, you have this sort of, you know, your vibe is the horror vibe. Let's just throw it out there. I mean, even though you've done so much stuff that's not horror, I really think it's kind of interesting because, you know, I can remember the first comic books I got. I think this is like 1972, 73. So like a long, long time ago. And my dad brought home one of those 3-packs. Mm-hmm. You know, whatever went back to a distributor got repackaged into these things. And one was Baby Snoots, I think from Dell Comics, which is like a, you know, anthropomorphized baby elephant and its like mouse friend. And I'm sure that was what was on the outside. My dad's like, that'll be good for the kid. And then like on the other side was like an Atlas Comics adventure thing of some sort of flying superhero kind of character. And on the inside was like Marvel's like Dead at Night or something. And it was like a Jack the Ripper-esque kind of cover of this woman walking on a, you know, an Edwardian lamplit street and a guy with a long dagger, you know, in the foreground in the shadows. And that comic scared the shit out of me at, you know, 4 or 5 years old, however old I was. And needless to say, I did not grow up a big fan of horror in that respect. And there's many other events that happen in between and, you know, but in the intervening 3 or 4 years leading up to the release of Jaws, which kind of took me off that table. So why horror?
You know, to some degree, the easy answer is I just like it, right? It's it's what I like. It's the kind of stories I like to read or watch or whatever. I just like horror. I like being scared. I like the feel of it. And I feel like I'm decent. I'm pretty good at writing them. But the other answer is there's a couple other reasons. You know, I also feel like horror is kind of a hopeful genre for me. Even I need this sensation that even in the face of these awful things, these characters are fighting to survive. That even they may not make it, but they tried. And I love that feeling of characters trying to make it, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. And then, you know, the other answer is writing horror stories for me is my way of coping with this existential dread I feel every second of every day. I live in a state of fear, and writing horror stories helps me cope with these various fears. It's very sobering when I think about how little, and this is where a lot of horror comes from in general, how little I matter in the world.
Okay.
Most people, and it seems like people more and more live under this illusion that they matter.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth of it is they don't. None of us do. We don't matter. And what's more, yes, yeah, no joke. And what's more, the world does not care about you.
Right.
And and we all deal with that. We all feel that way sometimes. And writing these horror stories helps me cope with that concept. It helps me cope with just all the many things I'm afraid of in the world. It's sort of a confrontation for me to do these things or to tell these stories.
So kind of like facing your own fear by generating it and saying, okay, I'm going to somehow develop some agency for however brief it will be,
right,
in this context.
Yeah, I feel like that's what it's about. I mean, it's fun, it's entertaining, but also it's therapeutic for me in some way.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I worked at this company, and I had, I was integral to the team that needed to do the things that it needed to do, and it's a very big, well-known company. And I remember one day going and just looking at the volume of work I had to do, and it was just more was always going to be coming. And I go, it doesn't matter. Like, I could get hit by the bus and it doesn't matter, because this stuff all has to be done in the eye of the business. So they would just get this work done however it needed to get done. And that's when I developed the hit by the bus theory, which could be applied to, as you said, everybody in the world in that respect.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So maybe they should need to read a few more horror stories, and people won't be so self-absorbed, self-important.
I mean, so for the existential dread, I mean, like, where do you form that, the source of that for you? I mean, I understand existentialism, and I understand that it's not exactly a specific thing, but it's not this sort of like amorphous thing in terms of like, you can go like, I'm always worried about planes falling out of the sky. Like that, if that's your fear.
I am worried about that.
Mostly if you're in the plane, right?
Yeah, I'm worried. I don't like that. I wish you hadn't said it. I'm gonna have nightmares tonight about
Don't worry, we're not in a plane right now, Cullen. We're on the ground.
Yeah, but what if one falls on my house?
If?
I don't know. I mean, look, so you'll say, I mean, when I was a kid, I was always afraid I have some horrifying illness. I mean, as a young kid, I was like, well, my lips are chapped. That must mean I'm going to die of something. It's just and yet, and despite that, my friends and we were always the kids who were out doing the stuff we shouldn't be doing. I mean, we were always the ones going places we shouldn't be going, taunting the people we shouldn't be taunting. It was always us doing nonsense and doing stupid things that would get us, that in many cases probably should have gotten us killed.
Right. If not punched in the face.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Mm-hmm. But you know what? I remember all these doing these dumb things and thinking, man, that was fun.
Sure.
I remember going out on Halloween night one time with like a group of like 10 friends. And one of my friends, this car drove by, and my friend yelled something at him, yelled some insult. And that car chased us all night long. I mean, everywhere we went, that car was there, and it would speed around the corners, and it would, and maybe, probably they were just messing with us.
Sure.
What if they weren't? And we were scattering and going off in little groups and thinking to ourselves, we're going to get killed tonight. and we had a blast.
Yeah.
Like,
How old were you? How old were you at the time?
I have to think of which friends I was hanging out with. I would have been in 6th grade.
Okay.
So however old that was.
All right. So that's like 11-ish.
Yeah, maybe somewhere around there. It was the most fun it's the most fun I ever had on Halloween, was getting chased and potentially murdered by people in a black car that we
They were
thought were.
probably 17-year-old kids,
Oh,
and you're
chances
probably
are,
worried that you hit the car with a an egg or something. Who knows?
chances are they were just messing with us, but
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
it was delightfully terrifying. Um,
Sure.
and that, in that moment, I was, it was fun. It was scary. You don't want to get caught, but okay, if you do, you figure your way out of it.
Right.
So that's not the stuff that scares me. It's a bigger picture. It's like I live with this thought that there's always something bad, um,
Something bad could happen
right around the corner.
or
Not
will
could.
happen.
There's something bad about to happen, and I don't know when. And it's just that's a constant for me.
And this has been since you were a kid, or is this something that's evolved?
It's evolved because there was a moment I remember. There was a time in my life where I couldn't care less about anything. Like nothing fazed me. Nothing. The potential of disaster didn't bother me. It came in my maybe mid-20s or something. I don't
Okay.
know why it decided to surface the way it does, but at this point I've dealt with it long enough.
Yeah.
It's a companion. I know what it is. I know what's going on. I know what's going on up here. I know it's good.
I was going to make a joke that it started in your sophomore year of high school and someone stole all your dreams in a folder, but
Maybe so. No, it didn't. It was later than that. It was later.
I know, but I mean that's the doom that's hanging around the corner, was that kid just waiting for you to go into the locker room, bathroom, or something.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but these kinds of things are, fragmentary, creations of our mind.
Sure.
We can look back and we can be completely honest about that outside of the event happening, because
Right.
when you're in the middle of something, it's real hard to differentiate and go, wait a minute, fears and emotions can be controlled. Like you can do that, but that takes a lot of training to do that. But I think what's interesting is that that's also a wellspring, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like for someone who writes horror stories, well, it's creating the thing that is the scary sort of conceit, and then you can take this seed and then grow it into something bigger.
Right. Yeah. I mean, all that stuff's idea. It's all as I would put, it's all nightmare fuel. So,
All right. Well, I mean, but how long did it take you to recognize that and actually utilize it versus not be happy about it?
I started writing horror stories when I was 18 or 19 years old. I don't know that I recognized that I was trying to draw on that stuff and use that. I want to write a scary story.
Right.
It was because, for a while, I always liked horror stories, horror movies. And then there was a brief moment where I decided I was going to go into special effects makeup. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a special effects makeup artist. And and I got really into that. Like it was like doubling down on horror, because that's what I wanted to do. It was like, Tom Savini,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to. I was reading Fangoria. I was devouring Fangoria magazine, and then they'd review some horror novel, and I was like, well, I really got to read that because it sounded awesome. And that just kind of fueled this interest in horror fiction, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I started just writing. I was writing and submitting horror short stories 18 or 19 years old. That's what I, set out to. I was writing, these stories and submitting them. But I don't know. And even now, I'll sit down and I'll write an idea out. I'll start scripting some idea for some new comic. I don't usually sit down and say, I'm going to write a story dealing with my fear of planes falling out of the sky. It's just, I'm going to write a story I think is going to be entertaining. Those things will flow into it without mine. I don't need to make those things enter the story. It's going to be in there. These things that I'm scared of will manifest.
Okay. You just reminded me of something that I thought of when you were talking earlier, about people, fighting for their lives. And I was thinking, I'm thinking about like my current book series that I'm writing. And I thought, it's not horror, but these people are fighting for their lives. Like, an action adventure story in many ways are people fighting for their lives.
Sure.
Because they're trying to stop the thing. If you using the Avengers movie as an example, like all these things are coming to kill the world, they have to fight to stop it. And I'm trying to define, what's the difference?
And there are horror elements in all of those stories. I mean, a big purple guy who could snap his fingers and create and just, turn half the universe's population to ash is a pretty horrific thought when you think about it, right? That's existential. I mean, that's it.
Totally is. It totally is.
For me, where and this isn't like a cemented rule because it depends on the story, right? In a lot of cases, it's this sense of helplessness or would-be helplessness in the face of it. For me, a great, my favorite horror stories are not a super soldier who's been given a serum that makes him as strong, the strongest human alive facing these things. It's the milkman who pulls up to the wrong house and then has to deal with whatever comes spilling out.
By the way, the next Jason Statham movie will be called The Milkman.
The Milkman. Well, he's got the beekeeper now.
He has a different one. There's another one too. The mechanic. He's got the mechanic, the beekeeper. They'll have the milkman.
Yeah.
So they'll just keep it going.
I like, and that's not to say I don't like horse. I love stories with larger than life heroes that are, when Captain America in that freaking movie, when that bus or train or whatever goes by and there's Captain America standing there and the music starts up, I have no doubt Captain America is going to save the day.
Sure.
Even at the end of that first of the final two big Avenger movies, which ends on a super dark moment, I'm like, Captain America's going to save the day. It's all right. Don't worry. I know that. I don't know it when it's a real horror movie. I don't know it.
Right.
Even when there's a larger than life hero, I was just thinking of the movie Pitch Black recently, and Vin Diesel's character Riddick. He's complete badass. He can, but you don't know. I don't know that he's going to make it off that planet because he was under such overwhelming odds, and that's to me. There's the difference. When I read a typical horror, superhero story, I know they're going to make it out. That's, the death of Captain Marvel for me was traumatizing when I was a kid, when I read that graphic novel.
Yeah.
Because here's Captain Marvel and he doesn't make it out.
Right.
And it wasn't a super villain that takes him out. I mean, technically maybe, but.
Sure. But that's sort of a second order effect.
Yeah. It was not a super villain that took him out, and he didn't go out fighting. I mean, fighting, yes, but not, he wasn't punching his way with mega fists or whatever out of that battle. And that was traumatizing for me.
Me too.
I think about, other superhero comics like New Mutants 18 which was the first of the Demon Bear saga. Opens with this great scene of Charles Xavier coming out to like a mob of policemen that are standing outside the mansion. And he says, listen, everyone, calm down. We can talk our way out of this or whatever. And boom, he gets blasted with a shotgun and thrown back, his chest just spilling everywhere. And I remember reading that as a kid being, It's like, I don't know what's going to happen in this comic anymore. I no longer know, because I had never seen that happen
Right.
in a comic, superhero comic. I was like, I don't know what's about to happen in this book. And I was terrified for those issues, because I was like, I don't know if these characters that I've loved for 18 issues of this comic series are going to survive. And all I did know was they wouldn't survive unchanged. I was like, this is going to change everything.
It was a master stroke on Chris's half to change this teenage, X-Men comic book into a things count horror story for a while. And it was so, I guess, and I don't think it could have been done without Bill's artwork.
No, the artwork changed the tone instantly, because
completely.
It was such a departure from the art of the previous issue.
Right.
And then you're like, what is this? And what's happened? Why am I in this world all of a sudden?
Totally. It's like that X-Men issue that Barry Smith illustrated, the one with Katie Power and Wolverine.
Oh yeah, is the cover has Wolverine getting ready to stab one of the Power Pack kids? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of these things where you wouldn't, why are we having a Power Pack kid in an X-Men comic book? And I think if the regular monthly artist drew it, it wouldn't have the same sort of fearful impact that Winsor Smith applied to that story. And of course, comics, right? This is what makes them so freaking so cool. But at early ages.
Yeah, and so to your point, you could tell horror stories within these action stories. There are moments in action movies that I find horrific. So it's difficult to find. I don't know if it's I don't know if it's art, but I like it. I don't know if it's horror, but I know it when I see it. I can't necessarily define it. It's but
yeah, I think I guess there's a sort of a generic sensibility of horror, whether it's this sort of mystic entity of some sort that is causing some sort of terrifying situation, or it's some supercharged, unstoppable person, whatever, that's going to kill everybody. That might be the sort of the big label areas, but then you can really kind of blend a whole lot of story and genre together.
Yeah, I feel like almost everything I've done, even in superhero books, I always have some sort of small horror element to it.
Yeah.
I did Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe. Marvel came to me and said, "Hey, Cullen, we want to do a book called Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe." I was like, "That's great. Can I do it?" And Deadpool is really freaking scary. He's, I want to do something that's a little uncomfortable, what he's, how he does it. And they said, yeah. And to me, Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe is a horror book.
Yeah.
It's got goofy Deadpool stuff in it from time to time, but it's also, it's pretty freaking dark. It's a Magneto. I pitched that as what if Magneto was a slasher? What is he's a serial, let's play Magneto as this, at least in the eye of the public, as this sort of slasher that hasn't been caught yet. And that's the way I wanted that's how I started the Magneto series. Is he was this, people were talking about him, and he was this figure that he's killing people. You got to stop him, but you can't.
Right. I think that's what's cool. To me, what makes for great comic books is not ongoing continuity, but stories.
Yeah.
And stories don't have to just kind of drag on forever. I think a story, just let them be stories. And, I get the continuity thing to a degree, but let's not just keep a thing going just for that fact.
As a kid, I loved it. As a younger reader, I was like,
because you felt like you were part of something.
Yeah. I wanted it. I wanted that bigger world, bigger universe. And Chris Claremont, again, he was a master at making that world,
Agreed.
within the X-Men or whatever. But it's become less, I couldn't tell you what happens in major comic book universe continuity anymore. It's
I listen, I'm terrible at keeping up with any of it. And it's I said to Duncan Ferredo, I was like, I bought the 3 issues of his giant robot Hellboy. And I'm like, that is the first time I bought 3 comic book issues in a row. And I can't remember how long.
Right.
Because I just have such a hard time keeping. Oh, I got to go back to the comic shop. Okay, yeah. Like I don't even remember what I bought. Like I don't know what I'm supposed to look for. So it becomes an impossibility for me. You were talking about like mixing things in the question marks and all that kind of stuff. And like so, you have this upcoming book for Zoop, Copycat.
Yes.
And I read the preview, and it's interesting. It's interesting because it's a big question mark. That preview, of her at work and then on her way home. It's a big thing, and like I can see how you could have that terror because there is a lot of scary stuff in there. In that little.
Yeah, Copycat's one of those books. I would call it. This is where I call a lot of things. It's horror adjacent. There are horror elements in it,
right?
But it's really, it's a hard sort of genre to pin down because it has superhero elements. But that's not it's not a superhero universe where people are putting on their spandex in the phone booth there. It's about an ER nurse who has a unique ability to diagnose illnesses or ailments by touching someone. But when she does that, she takes on like some of the pain and some of the so it's an ability with a cost. And as the story unfolds, she runs into another person, and when who's been injured, who's dying, and when she touches him, she not only absorbs some of the pain, but she absorbs this person's a very good fighter, and she absorbs some of that fighting ability. So in a little bit, it's like Rogue from the X-Men, right?
Yep.
If Rogue
and
from
Long
the
Shot.
X-Men, or Long Shot, psychometric powers or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If those characters had a real world, very important job of being an ER nurse, and
what are you saying? Superheroes aren't an important job?
I'm just saying that Sarah in Copycat was in the thing that appealed to me about the book was we were telling the story of a person it's a pretty grounded story, and Sarah's a pretty grounded character. She has this one unique ability that makes her different and gets her into trouble. But we're introducing this different world, and yes, there are characters with abilities. I don't like the word superpowers when we're talking about Copycat because it doesn't fit into that world.
Right.
But Copycat really is a mystery. It's an action mystery. It just happens to have a little bit of superpower.
It's a scary action mystery.
Yeah. Yeah, because it builds, and it's I think like I said, the thing I like most about Copycat is I just like that she's sort of a real world character, despite the special ability she has.
Where did the idea of this one come for you?
So, my partner mentioned earlier, my production partner Heath Amodio, got in contact with Todd Garner, who has been involved in the new Mortal Kombat movie and Tag and The Sorcerer's Apprentice. And Heath was just a fan. And he reached out and said, hey, have you ever... Heath's unique ability is that he'll just reach out to people and talk to them. He doesn't care. He doesn't... And I guess what really makes it unique is that these people respond to him and actually will have conversations. So he started talking to Todd Garner, and he asked him, he said, hey, have you ever thought of doing comics? Cullen, Bunn, and I do some comic stuff sometimes. And Todd said, yeah, I have this idea that I think would work in comic book form. And he sent us a few paragraphs describing it. It was not called Copycat at the time. It was called something else. But he sent like just a few quick paragraphs of what he had in mind, and the gist of it was, ER nurse who could touch someone and diagnose their abilities gets into trouble. That's so we got that, and Heath called me, and we immediately just started riffing ideas back and forth. What we could do, what could this, what would what kind of trouble would this person get into? What could the story look like? We knew that Todd wanted it to be grounded. He had stated several times, grounded. Let's make it grounded. Mm-hmm. So Heath and I just took that initial concept and we just started building it out. We'd go in one direction and realize it didn't work, and we'd break it back down to where we could work with it again, like Play-Doh. You shape it and reshape it until it comes into a form that works. And then we got it to where we liked it. We sent our like couple of page outline to Todd, and he liked it. So then Heath and I wrote a comic about it. So yeah, that one was one where someone brought us this idea, and we just liked it enough that we wanted to pursue it. Heath's sister is a nurse, so it was kind of a thing he really wanted to deal in that world. I've always wanted to do. I love the idea of real world people in in these strange supernatural events. So I like that part of it. And yeah, we just went back and forth, breaking down these, this idea and seeing where we could take it. Some of those ideas we came up with were really bad. and then we just, we just tear it back down until we can get it to a point where we can fix it.
How do you guys work together? I mean, you said you got on calls and that's spitballing sessions. Who typically takes the first crack at it?
Well, what I do, and I've co-written a lot of books. I don't like co-writing. I'm going to be very blunt about this, and he knows this, so it's not. He's heard me get on this soapbox a lot. I don't like co-writing. I don't, and I think people think it's easier. Like, oh, let's co-write it. This will go a lot easier. No, it's not easier. It's more difficult. It takes more time, and it frustrates the hell out of me. But if I believe in the story, it's worth doing, right? So, that's fine. But I've co-written a lot of books in my time, and co-writing I've found means different things to different writers and different editors. In some cases, co-writing is, hey, Cullen, you write all of it, and then we're going to put the other name on it to try to make sure it looks, because this is me starting in my career. You write everything, and let's put another name on it. Whatever, I don't care.
Hey, there's a marquee for a reason, buddy.
Yeah. And sometimes it's we outline together, and one person, Cullen writes it all. But the situations where I've really enjoyed co-writing and what I think really works has always been, we outline the book together, and then we break down the pages we want to write. So what Heath and I do, I'm big on outlines. I think comics have to be outlined because they're so constrained. Every part of the creation of a comic is about economy and what you can do on the page, how many pages you have, how many issues, it's all, you got to make it fit. So I outline everything in grueling detail. But so Heath and I get on the phone and we outline the book. Maybe not in as much detail if I were just writing it myself, but we outline the book. And it'll say, on page 1, Sarah goes to work and it's a normal day. And then page 2, she touches a patient and absorbs their pain and realizes what they are, what their illness is. But we just outline it that way. And then we look at it and we say, okay, it's almost like a draft pick at that point. It's like, okay, which section do you want to write? And somebody will say, I'll write pages 3 through 6. And then I'll write pages 7 through 10. And we just dole it up.
Nobody wants 11 through 14. It's always sad.
Nobody wants that exposition heavy page. But,
Yeah.
we just pick the things that we think we can do the best job on those pages. We go off, we write them, we pull it into one document, and then we kind of go through it and smooth it out to make it look
Mm-hmm.
like it was written in one pass to begin with.
Do you do that together, or do you like each take a pass and then that usually blurs all the lines?
That part we usually do together. I mean,
Okay.
it's been different. There have been times where it's like, we don't have time. Cullen, you do it. You do it.
Once again, Cullen, can you just write this out?
Well, or Heath. I mean, Heath shouldered a lot of that kind of stuff on this book in particular. But yeah, usually, we break things down and we try to write the same amount of pages. And maybe in part one, Heath writes a few extra pages, and then in part two, I write it. We try to make it up, and I write more pages.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of situation is what I feel like is the best co-writing situation can be, is where you're really shouldering the same. But even then, it's not easy. Co-writing is not the dream people think it is.
No, I mean, I get it. I mean, I talk to people, like I have friends who are co-writing team, like that's what they do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, God bless you. But like, it's not that I don't like working with people, but I really, really like getting lost in that time and working my way through the whole thing. And if I have to stop and go, all right, now I hop over here, or I got to wait for somebody else to come back with their thing, like I would go bonkers.
Yeah. I've not Heath, but I've written other projects where my co-writer's in the house, is in my studio in another room. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to go write my pages. I'll be right back. And I'll go and I'll write my pages, and I come out and say, all right, what do you got? And I've written one page. And I'm like, oh, God, what?
Right. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, and I think that's, independently, I'm sure they're phenomenal, but it's like, everybody works at a different rate. And people who are really well versed in using outlines typically can produce a lot more camera ready work than the sort of the discovery writer who has to feel and find their way through everything. I mean, they're making a lot more work for themselves up front versus just beat sheeting something out and going, okay, here's how everything's going to go. Let me fill this in and we're good to go. If it all makes sense, it makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. It's and again, it's not that I don't love the process of co-writing. I'm sure some people are good at it. So that means I have to believe in the project and think it's a great book for me to really want to do it. And
totally. So you believe in this, and it's going to be a great book. And I mean, the primer is exciting. So, I finish it and go, I want to know what happens. Like that's, so well done. Bravo. Why Zoop? Like, why did you guys go with that crew?
Mm-hmm. Well, originally Copycat was with a publisher, and there were even like preview editions of issue 1 released at a convention and things like that. But the way comics work, sometimes it just doesn't work out the way you think it will, and things fall apart. So when that happened, and Heath and I got control of Copycat back, we talked a little bit about where to take it and what to do. I had been talking to Jordan at Zoop for a little while about just trying a project together. I like crowdfunding projects. I think I will always have, at this point, I have too many in my head, too many crowdfunding projects that I want to do. So I'll always have crowdfunding projects cooking. So I've been talking to Jordan about it. And it was just sort of the right timing to try it. We've been talking about doing something on Zoop. Copycat falls back into our lap as a book we could do. Why not try it at, see what we do with Zoop and see how it works out. So it was really just the timing of it. And, I I like what Zoop does. I like that Zoop
Mm-hmm.
is a comic book only platform. It's very comic focused. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to, I like the support that Zoop gives the creator. They do a lot of the back end stuff on it as well. So
Yeah.
it was nice to try to do a book that we've got that support system built into it.
It's kind of cool. It's like this. It's this a la carte, publishing, partner, which is
Right.
unique.
Yeah. And yeah, it's just like I said, I can't do everything on Kickstarter, right?
Right. And doing a Kickstarter, there's so much work. Like it's a
Right.
ridiculous amount of work. Not to say that running a Zoop campaign isn't a lot of work.
Yeah, it's all work. Yeah, look, it's going to be work, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's nice to have. I like that there are resources out there and there are tools that creators can use to, make these comics, whether it's Kickstarter, Zoop. I think that's a cool.
Yeah.
It's nice that there are different resources available.
Well, also you can lean on their expertise. And I think that's a hard part about if you are kickstarting something and you don't have a lot of experience in making comic books, you can end up with, a comic book that doesn't lay flat when closed.
Right. Well, and that's, the other thing with Copycat is that, it came back, I say it fell back into our lap. At the time it fell back, I wasn't ready to run a full campaign Heath and I weren't ready to run a campaign by ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Zoop, though, can handle, can shoulder the things we can't shoulder at the moment.
Lots of phone calls and emails that you don't have to write. You just have to say yes or no. Yeah. It's huge.
So that was nice, too. That's the other reason. It was just a perfect timing, perfect situation. The project's ready to go. I mean, the book's ready. It wasn't like we were thinking, let's get this done down the line. It's ready to go. Let's do it.
Yeah. Right.
And it's ready to go. Let's do it moments are great. Unless you just don't have the time, unless your time is not necessarily your own. And that's where Zoop really comes in and helps with that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's awesome. And I can't wait to see the rest of it. And I can see, when people hear this now, they can actually just go, the link.
There you are. I think you're back.
So, people at this moment, okay, I think I'm back. I can hear you.
You're back.
But people can go to the link in the description and they can go to zoop.gg and they can find the campaign. They can order the book right now.
Yeah. Yeah, you can order the book. You can order the book now. The book is done. Zoop, I think, lists the delivery date of, like summer, but I don't see and that's good. I'd rather it be listed like it's going to, if you order it, you're going to get it in the summer once printing's done. I think it'll be sooner than that, but I don't want to, I'd rather I've gotten into too many situations in crowdfunding where like, this is going to be a breeze. Book's done. Let's print it and ship it next week. That doesn't work. That doesn't work.
Well, I guess under promise, over serve, right?
Well, I'd rather people be expecting it later and they get it sooner. Mm-hmm. It's a nice surprise.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. So, what's on the schedule in the future? What is 24 look like for you? Are you going back to Heroes? Are you doing other shows? What projects are you working on?
So I'm not doing as many shows probably as I was doing, say, 5 years ago. I kind of cut back and I started the world cut back. And then I kind of, I started doing a few more. But this year I'm probably not going to do as many shows. I don't know yet. Maybe. That depends. It's just the thing with conventions is they take away. I like doing them. I love meeting people. They just take so much time. And it's, I have, this year is a busy year for me. I'm working on a novel, I'm working on a feature film, and I'm working on a bunch of comics. So I got to figure out how to balance all that time, juggle those. I got to juggle those projects in general, and throwing a convention into it throws it all out of whack.
No, I get it. And I think a lot of people, I mean, like you said, it's great to go to shows and it's great to meet people, but unless you've designed your business and your livelihood is supported by going to shows and selling products by hand to pay your bills, it only takes away from your ability to actually do that job if that's not what it's, structured.
I love shows. I really do. But I don't think people realize, it takes a lot of time. But beyond that, like I said, I'm working on a lot of comics. I've got a few that have been announced. I'm doing the Gotcha Man comic for Mad Cave, which Gotcha Man for Americans of our age is G-Force or Battle of the Planets.
Battle of the Planets.
So I'm doing that comic for Mad Cave, which I think starts in May on Free Comic Book Day. I'm doing the next Godzilla versus Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comic for IDW and Boom. I wrote that.
Sensing a theme here.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, that stuff I'm a big fan of too, especially that old Godzilla. But so I'm doing that for IDW and Boom. I've got a number of horror comics that haven't been announced yet. I'm looking over at my board to make sure I don't mention or I don't miss something. I'm doing a book called Beyond Mortal. I did a book called Beyond Mortal that comes out in June, I think, from Dark Horse as an original graphic novel.
It's good. You shared it with me. It's good, dude.
Yeah, I'm excited for Beyond Mortal because Beyond Mortal is a superhero universe. It's a new superhero universe, and then I throw these terrible, horrific events into it. So I've always wanted to do a horror superhero universe. Pitched it to Marvel many times, pitched it to DC many times. I wanted to do a superhero universe that was very horror-centric, where the horror elements are just baked in. So Beyond Mortal comes out as an original graphic novel in June. And then early 2025, a second series, a spin-off series comes out featuring a new character that is set in the Beyond Mortal universe. And then we have a third series that is another character set in the Beyond Mortal universe. So this is my way of building my own horror universe. I'm going to start Danny Luckert is the artist of Beyond Mortal. He's the artist of the new series. He's the artist of the third series. So we're just going to start doing these Beyond Mortal books and play in that world. I love it. The second series, the one that starts in 2025, is the most fun I've had writing a comic ever. I mean, hands down. It's the most fun I've ever had. And we're going to do some, because Beyond Mortal doesn't come out until June or July or whenever it is. And then the next series doesn't come out until next year. Danny and I are going to do some cool things this year. We're going to release some free comics online that are new comics in the Beyond Mortal universe to start introducing people to the idea, to start showing off what we've got planned. Because I think some of these characters, people are just going to flip for them. And
they're cool, man. I reading what you sent me, these are superheroes, but every single one of them is definitely baked in a horror theme. Like, it's kind of cool.
So I think there's a lot of cool stuff I think going on. This graphic novel establishes the world, and then we've got. I mean, we could tell. Well, Danny and I have already. We've just made maps of. Oh, we're gonna. We have This is what we can do with this world. Here are the backstories we can explore. What artists do we want to talk about doing other Beyond Mortal spin-offs? I mean, we have high expectations and hopes for Beyond Mortal.
That's cool, man.
And that's, and we're so excited about it. That's why we're going to do, Danny is taking valuable time out of his schedule to draw comics that we're going to release online for free.
Yeah.
Because
Wow.
we love the world, we love these characters, and we just want to do some things that, you know, I also look, times are tough. I don't know if you know this, but times are kind of tough right now.
What are you running for office?
You know, times are hard. Give me a baby to kiss. No, it's so I like the idea of giving some comics away. Let people read some
Sure.
comics online for free. Some new stuff that
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to see in a comic. I mean, eventually we'll put the new
Sure.
content.
You collect it all in some. Yeah.
But I just love the idea of doing some free comics for people. My hope is it gets people excited for Beyond Mortal and for the series that comes next and for the series that comes next. And hopefully I would love to live in a world where I'm doing, 1 to 2 Beyond Mortal books a year just to just flesh that universe out. Because there's so many things I can do in a superhero world where publishing mandates are not telling me, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Well, it's, listen, it's baked into the Dark Horse comic book history. Like that, what you have there dovetails perfectly. I mean, from their early beginnings through their own superhero line in the 90s, everything really does have a horror vibe to it.
Yeah.
Ghost. I mean, these are all, it's all from the same. So like it's in that same wellspring. So I think that's pretty damn cool.
Yeah. And it's just, look, I'm never going to, I'm not going to be that guy who's like, oh, I hate superheroes. I don't. I love superheroes. I grew up with superheroes. I grew up living and breathing superheroes, and now I just want to do terrible things to them. So that's that's the Beyond Mortal universe.
There is a twisted turn that takes place in the creator's mind over a period of time. Yeah, it happens. It happens to every single one of them.
And it's, it's tough. Danny gives me so much trouble. He's like, my favorite character, you kill him off. So, just brutally kill them off. And I'm like,
Yeah. And listen, dude, you're doing some great work, Cullen, but he's putting in the hours. Well, he's bonding with these characters in a way that you're not.
That's true. I mean, Brian Hurt used to say the same thing to me. We did the Six Gun together, and we introduced these 4 Horseman characters early on, and he designed them. They have such great designs, and I'm like, let's kill those guys off. And he's like, oh, come on.
You're cruel. You're cruel.
I guess. I mean, you have to have a little bit of a cruel streak, I suppose.
Well, I think you wouldn't be, a master of horror if you weren't a little bit cruel somewhere.
Well, and the things are, these are characters I like. Sure. It's not like I'm just saying let's kill them for no reason. I think character death needs to mean something, and sometimes your favorite characters meet the worst fates.
Well, that's the thing. They're the ones you like. The ones you don't like, guess what? They get caught in an explosion in the background. We don't care.
Yeah. Or they just go on and lead normal lives. They just lead a normal, happy life.
They go get a job at a marketing firm and they handle, career counseling.
Yeah, that's their life. The ones I don't like, they're the ones who get the worst.
That's the one when the plane falls on them.
Yeah, they get the maiming. It's usually the plane will fall on them like right after their moment of happiness. They experience true happiness and joy. And
my gosh, my long lost puppy.
Yeah.
Goners.
Yes, this is your long lost puppy, but in order to save the world, you must sacrifice it.
It's for the betterment of everyone else. Yeah. I get it. Well, I hope you choose to come back to Heroes. It'd be good to hang out with you a little more.
I love Heroes. Heroes is a great show. I mean, it's one of my favorite conventions to go to. I guess I need to send some emails. It's on my calendar that I'm going to do Heroes. I guess I just need to make sure I'm actually going to do it.
I think they haven't really fired up their engines yet on that one. So they're focused on getting the mini con taken care of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's such a good show. I mean,
Yeah,
here's the one I love. There's I love Planet Comic Con in Kansas City. Has a very Heroes vibe to me in a lot of
cool.
ways. So that's another one I really enjoy. Um, but yeah, not as many conventions this and events this year.
Well, if you're writing a novel, as I
Yeah.
know, there's a lot of hours necessary to sit there and make it work.
Yeah, it's and you have to switch gears. There's the problem. There's the thing. That's the big problem with writing prose versus comics is the switching of the gears is not just yeah,
It is so hard.
yeah. It's a grind. The switching of the gears is a grinding switch of the gears.
It's yeah, right. There's no clutch.
No.
You're just jamming it in, going, okay, now it's time to get into this mode.
Yeah. God, I wish that would be it would be such a nice thing if I could just switch without just fluidly move from one to the next. No.
Dude, I sit and I write prose in the morning half, and I tell myself, and I've worked on some comic projects, and I'm like, oh, you know what I'm going to do? Got the afternoon free. I'll go have lunch, and then I'll go sit down. I'll go to the coffee shop. I'll write a comic at the coffee shop,
Sure.
And I just sit there and I'm like, because it's not the same brain. It's a very different chunk of your brain.
Yeah. No, it is.
I end up outlining. I sit there and outline the comic book over and over again.
Yeah. It's my current plan is a couple of days a week are comics and a couple of days a week are prose. And then there's one day of marketing work and, non-writing.
Pitch meetings.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So yeah.
It's tough, man. I mean, the way to work and balance the stuff when you're fortunate enough to be able to do it is it's work. It's just straight up work, and it's not anything else but that.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, it's work. I mean, yes, I write comics for a living though, or
Sure.
tell stories for a living. It's not a bad. There are much worse jobs to have, but it is work.
But the thing is that, like, you were saying something at the beginning, and it sort of struck me about one thing that always annoys me. You were talking about sort of like being a pro and doing the work, and the thing is like, listen, to be a pro, you can't wait for inspiration to strike.
No.
You have to be a hunter and go out there and get it, and and be able to wrangle it at any moment. There is no just like, okay, well, I'll just sit around and I'll doodle, and then eventually I'll draw the page. I'm like, the clock's running, the day's happening. Like, and if you're like, oh, I work at night, I mean, like, then you're starting your day at 11. Like, I'm like, you gotta, it's tough, and it sounds mean and cruel and unfeeling to say that stuff, but the people who hire us don't care.
Oh yeah,
they need it done. Yeah. They need it done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, you good?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you all sorts of stuff about any good books or movies you've seen, but like we've come to the end.
This is it. This is the end of the line. That terrible thing I've known was looming ahead. The end. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I really appreciate you taking the time. It's great actually spending a little more time talking with you.
Yeah. It was fun.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, and once again, go to Zoop and find Copycat if you're interested in reading Cullen's latest.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.